If you want to learn about hacking, this is as easy and as awesome as it gets. You get a 4+ hour in-depth course showing you how to start from nothing right here in this video. Get a virtual box set up on your computer that gives you a safe environment to work in, how to use Kali Linux, how to do penetration testing, web testing, Wi-Fi hacking, and more. You get all of that starting from nothing with the very basic terms. I'll show you right now what you get in this video. You get an introduction to ethical hacking, what it is in detail, prerequisites, success tips for getting the most out of this, an overview of basic terminology, installing and building your hacking environment in a safe way no matter what kind of computer you're using, an introduction to the Linux terminal because you'll be working in Kali Linux. Ermin and I will take you through how to use the Linux terminal and know your way around. From there, you get technical welcome into Tor proxy chains, VPN, MAC changers, Nmap, Wi-Fi hacking and cracking, and Aircrack Reaver installation and usage. This will get you on your feet and hacking from a point of not knowing anything. You get 4+ hours of HD screen capture videos delivered to you as a free preview within this video of my course with Ermin that is one of the best on Udemy. It has 17+ hours of HD video. And while the course is $199, you're getting a quarter of it right now for free in this video. The best part about the course is you have a place to ask and get your questions answered. Ermin only answers questions in the course, and that's the main value of it, in addition to getting the 12+ more hours of HD video and full-length tutorials on the more difficult parts of how to do hacking online. You can get into the course for only $25 when you visit my website, jerrybanfield.com/Udemy, and grab a coupon. So enough about what this is. Here you go. Here it is. Enjoy. 4+ hours from zero into being a hacker, getting you functional and ready to go.
Hello everybody and welcome to this introductory video. Today I will be talking about ethical hacking, and I will also introduce you to the course itself. So first off, you might have noticed that the term ethical hacking is composed out of two words. You have ethical and you have hacking. Now hacking, the definition of hacking is quite broad. I mean, it encompasses a very wide range of activities. However, if you actually go to any of the online dictionaries pretty much, and if you type in the term hacking, generally it will say that it has something to do with computers. I cannot say that that is not true. However, that is only a small portion of the definition. Rather, instead, the act of hacking is actually having any system, and I mean any system, not just a computer system, not just a digital system. In fact, the system doesn't even need to contain any electronic parts. So literally any system, having it do something that you intended it to do as opposed to what it was designed to do. Now here is one short example that has been cited over and over again. You have a lock, basically. You have a door lock in your house. Everybody has one. Well, I sincerely hope that you have one. And the purpose of that lock is to prevent intruders from entering. So anybody who does not have a key cannot enter. People enter without a key anyway, because they pick the lock and then they enter. And that itself could be considered an act of hacking. Also an act of burglary, but that's another subject. Anyway, the ethical side of it would be when you have these large automobile industry manufacturers, and then they hire these burglars to come and pen test their locks. So basically they pay them very good sums of money to go to their factories and to try to unlock their cars. This doesn't need to apply only to locks for cars. It can also apply for your door locks. Manufacturers of pretty much all sorts of locks, they hire people to actually try and pick lock them, and then if they succeed doing it, and if they succeed, they pay them a very good sum of money. I do believe that prices for one car manufacturer, they went up to 1 million euros if you manage to break their locks. But what I'm trying to say here is that they have the ethical side of it would be when you have a permission to do it, when it's within the constraints of the law. And the act of hacking itself can be within the constraints of the law, but doesn't necessarily need to be. Anyway, we will not be focusing on those types of locks today, or during this course. During this course, I will teach you how to penetrate networks, how to exploit systems, how to break into computers, how to compromise routers, etc. You will be after you've finished this course, after you've absorbed all the information in it, you will gain the ability to do some serious damage. Now, because of that, I wish to give a disclaimer here. So first off, I do not encourage any sort of illegal activity. Furthermore, I strongly advise against it, and I am against it. So you do not have any legit need to do anything that is against the law with the knowledge that you're going to get during this course, because you're going to get some pretty good knowledge and you can abuse it very easily. It's not that difficult to abuse it. The opportunities are everywhere. They're endless because people tend to use insecure systems, or they use secure systems but they don't know how to operate or configure them, and then in turn those secure systems become insecure. But what I'm trying to tell you is there really is no need. I mean, if you want to do it for the money or something like that, you can make the same amount, if not more, in a perfectly legitimate way. People will pay you to actually test their networks and to see if you can find any vulnerabilities in them and then report them, perhaps even fix them. So, however, if you do decide to do something against the law in any country, I am not responsible for it. That is what I want to say. I do not claim responsibility for it, as I have already stated that I am doing this for purely for educational purposes, and I do not advocate the use of this material for any sort of illegal purpose. Now, I hope you understand why I had to make this disclaimer, and I this is not what I said. These are not just empty words. I really do stand by it, and that is my philosophy as well. In any case, during this course, I will show you numerous examples, methods. You will need some prerequisites over which I will go in the next tutorial. But you're in for a ride, so sit down, be patient. That is a very important thing in this line of work. Patience, because everybody has, I mean, everybody out there, I mean, if you are looking at this tutorial now, if you've typed in the term ethical hacking, I'm guessing that you've seen I'm guessing at some point of time in your lives, like myself, you have seen a movie that involves some sort of hacking with computers, and you see this terminal and you just see them typing in something there, and it just basically works. It works within 5 minutes or something like that. Let me tell you something. That has nothing to do with the real world, or very little to do with the real world. In the real world, people spend countless sleepless nights trying to do something, trying to obtain access, trying to bypass a password protected file or something of a kind in a server, trying to escalate privileges, trying to inject in a SQL injection or something of a kind. And they not only spend countless sleepless nights doing it, but they also spend a long time planning, preparing, and getting a general idea of what they can do, how they can execute an attack, etc. These are not things that you will be able to do within 5 minutes after you sit and open up your computer, your desktop computer, or whatever. You will need time, you will need patience, but above all, you will need to be curious. Curiosity is one of the first steps here, and obviously, since you've actually chosen to listen to this tutorial, to go through it, you do possess it already. You just need to build on it a little bit more, and you'll be where you want to be. In any case, I hope to see you in the next tutorial, and I bid you farewell. Hello everybody, and welcome to this tutorial. Today I will be talking about some of the prerequisites that you will require if you want to follow this course through. One of the first things that you need to be familiarized with is your working environment. So for myself, I have chosen to use two Linux distros. One will be Fedora 20, which is the operating system that I am using anyway, and also I will install a virtual machine. That virtual machine will be Kali Linux. Basically, it is a Linux distro which contains a great deal of pen testing tools, so it's very useful in that sense. Don't worry about it. I will explain this process in great detail, how you can set the virtual machine up, how you can install it, and so on and so forth. However, should you be using Windows, that is definitely not advisable for this kind of activity. Primarily because since I'm doing this in an environment that I own, it doesn't really matter to me if I'm anonymous or not, but in the real world, all the pen testing that is done in the real world, you're always trying to anonymize yourself. You're trying to be as invisible as possible, as much as possible. You do not want them to figure out where the attack is coming from or anything of a kind. You want to wipe your trail or something of a kind, and Windows is really not good for those sort of things. So there your anonymity level will be very low, and most of the tools that we're going to be using, they are native to the Linux environment. They were made for Linux. So some of them might not work under Windows. I have not tested them all out, but most of them will. So you can still use Windows if you like, because you're not hiding from anyone. But since I'm recreating the real life scenario here, I do need to actually use proxies, VPNs, and so on and so forth, just to show you how it is done, how you can do it. Also, for all the Mac users out there, if you're using Mac OS X, it doesn't really matter which version. Most of the stuff should work like no problems. The procedures are fairly simpler. The command line tools are the same. How you install them differs, but pretty much you will be able to run the same commands as me. So there shouldn't be any problems there. Your anonymity level with Mac OS X should be relatively good, but still on Linux you have the greatest anonymity, and you are rather safe in that sense. Other than that, you will also require working internet connection. And even though all of these attacks that we're going to do today, well, most of them, they work much, much better if you have an extremely fast internet connection. But some of these attacks are actually conducted from public Wi-Fi's, in real life anyway. We'll just pretend I will set up a wireless access point in my house and load it so that it's similar to the public Wi-Fi, which is very slow. Some of these attacks, as I said, they go over public Wi-Fi's, and as we all know, and as we've all painfully learned, public Wi-Fi's are not the fastest internet connections out there. So primarily because you have a lot of people that are connected to them, and there's a lot of data going through. They're not the safest networks out there either, but as I said, if you want to absolutely anonymize yourself, and that is what some people do, they actually go out and hook up to a public Wi-Fi, or they go to a bar or something of a kind. and conduct their attacks from there. Now, before they do that, they need to figure out whether the bandwidth of that Wi-Fi can sustain their attack. So they need to minimize it, they need to downsize it, and that is how they become absolutely anonymous. Anyway, the third thing that you will absolutely need, so these three things, these are the basic requirements. There are everything else we'll pick up on the way. I will show you how to do it, no problems there. But these three things, I can't really show you how to. I mean, I can, but it's a bit pointless how to go to your ISP and hook it up to the internet and hook your telephone to the internet or something of a kind. But in any case, the third prerequisite is a working wireless card. And when I say working wireless card, most of the devices have them. Pretty much all laptops from 2005 or from 2008 were standardized with wireless cards. If you're using a desktop machine that doesn't have a wireless card, you should, but it's not, you don't need to. But however, if you want, you won't be able to follow through a portion of this tutorial then. You should go out and buy a USB wireless card or something of a kind. They're pretty cheap, I don't know, 10, 15 bucks. So they're not that expensive and you can get them pretty much anywhere. Anyway, as I was saying, what I mean by a functional wireless network card is that it is recognized by your operating system. So if you are using a Linux distro like I am, you need to make sure that that the kernel of this Linux distro actually has the necessary drivers for the wireless card that you are using at the moment. If you're probably using Atheros or Broadcom, Atheros should be fine. Pretty much Linux kernel support a large amount of Atheros devices, if not all of them, in terms of network cards, so that should be fine. There were some problems with Broadcom, but as far as I'm informed, that has been solved, so no big deal there. If you're uncertain how to check whether your wireless card functions under your Linux distro, well, just try connecting to a Wi-Fi. If you can connect to a Wi-Fi access point, if you can connect, obviously it works. If you can't, it doesn't work. But don't just hop to a conclusion that it doesn't work. Maybe it's just turned off or something like that. But do not worry, I will show this in greater detail in the follow-up tutorials where we actually go over the installation process and all of that. Now there are a couple more things which we need to go over before we head over and start the installation. I would just like to go over some basic over some basic terminology that you will need in order to be able to follow this course, in order for you to be able to follow the future tutorials. In any case, I bid you farewell and I thank you for watching. Hello everybody and welcome to this tutorial. Today I will be talking about some of the basic terms which you will need in order to follow this course through. So first off, you have three main categories of people. There are white hat hackers, gray hat hackers, and black hat hackers. Uh, Everything that we will be doing falls into this category here. So white hats. Those are people whose activities are within the confines of the law. There are people such as pen testers, ethical hackers, people like you and me, and so on. Then you have gray hat hackers whose activities are bordering between legal and illegal. It's a bit of a shady area there. In addition to that, you have the most known category, which is black hat hackers. And usually, and unfortunately, every time somebody hears the term hacking, it is associated with people from black hat world. There are people who conduct all sorts of illegal activities or conduct activities without any regard for the law and, I don't know, extract information from certain servers, credentials, your credit card information, take services down, usually to extract some sort of financial gain. In any case, down below, you have footprinting. Now, the act of footprinting is basically information gathering. Uh, you are you're conducting some sort of reconnaissance work. You are figuring out the IP of the server, figuring out which ports are open, and with that you can conclude which services are running there. But it doesn't necessarily need to be confined to the digital world. The active footprinting can also be when you go to the company itself. You just walk in. It doesn't necessarily need to be a company. It can be pretty much any building with the servers in it. And you have a look around. You try to gather some information there on site, or you go and you dig to their trash cans. Go behind the building, jump into those trash containers, and get some information from there. Also, people have been known to go onto parking lots to see who the employees are, who works there, all sorts of things. So this is just general information gathering in regards to your chosen target. It doesn't need to be confined to the digital world. Anyway, down below you have certain types of attacks. You have DOS and DDoS. Basically the same thing implemented in a different way. DOS stands for denial of service, usually called childish attacks because they were relatively easy to implement, and they still are, provided of course you have enough machines, but that's the domain of DDoS. In general, what happens here is that you perform a certain amount of requests, more requests than a server can handle, and then server begins dropping connections. For example, Apache web server, I believe by default it can handle up to 10,000 connections or so. And if you can make more than 10,000 requests, basically everybody else making any sort of requests will not be able to access the website because their connections will be dropped simply because Apache will say, okay, I have too many users, I have more users than I can handle, all the other connections will be dropped by default, thereby making the site inaccessible even though you haven't really broken any codes, you haven't really broken through any firewalls or stole any passwords or anything of a kind. But when you're DOSing something, it's just you. So all the requests, everything is coming just from your own computer. And that is not always the most efficient of ways. In fact, it generally can only work if there is a flaw in the way in which requests are processed. However, that is why you have DDoS attacks. When you have multiple computers, multiple connections, and they are all making simultaneous requests to a certain server, and this is really difficult to fight off. I mean, you really need to have a clever configuration of your firewall, and you need to have quite a good firewall as well. Usually you would need a physical one to prevent these sort of DDoS attacks, and by physical I mean a router firewall or something of a kind. This is quite difficult to, it's not difficult to actually do the attack itself, as it is difficult to make the necessary preparations. First of all, you need to go about infecting other devices which you will enslave and use in order to perform this sort of an attack. This is the hard part. The DDoS part is quite easy compared to that. For that, in order for you to infect other computers, you need two things. You need RATs, remote administration tools, and you need to make them fully undetectable. That is what the term FUD stands for. So it just means that they cannot be detected by antiviruses, or more precise term would be that they are not labeled as something malicious by antivirus programs. And by the way, sometimes, actually most of the times, you don't actually need to make your own applications fully undetectable. There are plenty of pen testing companies out there, and not just pen testing companies, but other companies as well, who will pay very good sums of money if you can make their programs fully undetectable by antivirus programs. Down below, the RATs, remote administration tools. Now, they themselves are not some sort of hacks or anything of a kind. You just basically put them on a USB stick or something of a kind, send them in a mail, share them in a zip file, and in such a way, that's just one of the ways to infect other computers, other devices, enslave them, convert them into your slaves, into the slaves of the main server, wherever that might be, wherever you might set it up. And then you can use all of those computers to conduct all sorts of activity. This is very good because it anonymizes you to a very large extent. It is very difficult to track you. It is very difficult to track somebody down, whoever is doing this, primarily because the users who are infected, they have no idea that somebody else is controlling their devices, because nothing is really happening on your desktop. You can't really see. All the processes running are being run in the background, and your processor is executing them using up. The only way to see it would be basically to start up a task manager or something of a kind, and then see the running processes, and perhaps you could spot it there, but not even there if somebody has implemented a rootkit. So a rootkit is a tool basically which you install onto an operating system, and it is able to hide running processes from the system itself. So when you, for example, start a task manager in Windows or something of a kind, the purpose of a rootkit would be to hide the processes from the task manager. Basically, how it works is that task manager requests information from the system, from the kernel, and then the kernel of the system responds, which is the core of the system where all the drivers and the key functionalities are. The kernel of the system then responds, hey, I have this, and this process running, here you go. But what rootkit would do is redirect those requests from task manager to itself, and would basically say, I don't have such processes running. So very, very dangerous and potent combinations here that we will use later on as we progress through this tutorial, but for the time being, I just wanted to give a bit of an introduction to it and give you an idea of what we shall be doing through some of these basic terms and concepts. Next up, we have phishing attacks. Now, phishing attacks are basically when you apply some sort of bait, somebody bites it, and then you pull on it. Simple as that, right? As the same way you do phishing. Well, not quite. Phishing attacks would be when you get I don't know, an email from someone, and there's a link in it. You click on it, and it throws you somewhere, I don't know, onto some website. It perhaps looks like something legit. It perhaps looks like a website that you are using or something of a kind, but it is not. And you pass in your credentials, and that can be a problem. But this is generally avoided today. This is not something that happens in such a way. Rather, instead, what happens these days is that the DNS servers get changed on your routers, and once that happens, all the requests that you make on your web browser get redirected. So for example, if you type in facebook.com, you're going to get a domain with facebook.com from some private DNS server, God knows where, whose MX records are altered, and they have been configured, for example, to make redirections, to interpret, sorry, not redirections, but rather instead to interpret facebook.com to a certain IP address that does not belong to Facebook or anything like that. So you open up your Facebook, it looks exactly the same. There is no way to tell, because in the upper left corner of the screen you have the domain name written. It's www.facebook.com, and basically provide in login credentials. Once you do that, they're gone. Somebody has them. One of the ways to detect this, even though it's very, I mean, it's not hard, but nobody really pays any attention to it. In the upper left corner, you might check whether the protocol is HTTPS instead of HTTP. Because usually, if these kind of attacks are conducted, it's not going to be HTTPS, as that is a lot harder to implement. But if it is HTTPS, there really wouldn't be any legit way of figuring it out other than actually checking the keys, checking the certificates, and nobody actually does that. I mean, well, maybe not nobody, but 99% of users out there are not gonna bother to go about conducting such checks. Anyway, I know it sounds a bit complex, but believe me, I will explain this in great details. I will give you several demonstrations, and by the end of this course you will understand and know how to do this with great ease. It will not present a significant obstacle in your line of work. Excellent. Now that we have approximately half of these terms out of our way, I will continue to deal with them in the follow-up tutorial, and I sincerely hope to see you all there. Hello everybody, and welcome to this tutorial. Here I'm just gonna continue from where I left off in the previous one. If you have not seen the previous tutorial, I strongly urge you to do so, as the two are closely interrelated, so to say. Anyway, previously we've discussed some of these things such as DOS, rats, phishing, and so on and so forth. But here I want to go a step further and tell you about SQL injections, VPNs, proxies,